Madam Deputy Clerk, the time is 7 p.m. I'm going to call this special council public planning meeting to order. Town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Gallo, second. Councillor Weiss, comments, questions? Call the vote. On your e-score. Linda, I'm a yes. I forgot my iPad today. Apologize. Councillor Gilliland's yes. Oh, it didn't show up on it's not showing up on this screen. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's special public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the town's official plan review. For the planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, the consultant will provide a presentation on the official plan review process and public engagement and outline the second draft of the official plan. 2, following the presentation, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually or in person. We do ask that when members of the public provide comments or questions, they are directed to the chair and that members of the public do not engage in debate. And 3, either town staff or the consultant will answer your questions. I will keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the application being considered, you must complete a planning interested party and speaker request form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca, or complete a green interested party form, which Linda's holding up right there, and leave it with Linda, our committee coordinator, sitting right there at the front. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the deputy town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 5.1 being PDS 23-041, official plan review second draft. Notice was provided for this meeting by email to identified interested parties, posting an ad in the local newspapers, advertising on local mobile signs, and via social media, including engageaurora.ca. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentation. Mr. Ramono?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just turn it over to Edward Terry. Not on? Can you hear me?
Now you are.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to Edward Terry, our Senior Policy Planner, who's been managing the OP review since we launched it back in early 2020, and he'll introduce our consultants here this evening who have a presentation and will provide the background and outline next steps and specifically get into the details of some of the changes to the second draft that's before council and the community. Edward.
Mayor, we have today with us from our technical consulting team, David Riley from SGL. He'll walk through a presentation of the second draft of the official plan, as well as go through some of the extensive consultation that has taken place over the span of the project.
Thank you. Mr. Riley, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, and thank you, Edward and Marco, for the introduction. So we could load the presentation. Again, my name is David Riley from SGL Planning and Design. I've been before you on numerous occasions and probably before many members of the public who are here today. So happy to be here again. Maybe I'll begin the presentation now. As Marco and Edward introduced, here we are nearing the end of the process of the town's official plan update. We are currently in phase 4, which is the actual creation of the amendments leading up to the town's adoption of the updated official plan. Following adoption, we move on to phase 5, which is the approval authority. In this case, likely the province of Ontario. Slide, please. So on that blank slide over there was, it showed up blank on the slide before this.
I can just can you hit the button and lift up? If there's a button on the console there and it says up and down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it'll lift the whole thing up. There we go.
Fancy. Thank you very much.
Get it closer to you so that way it gets a bit louder for everybody.
It's great. And it'll save my back so I'm not leaning over so much. So thank you. But the slide before that, it's not showing up on the screen, but just wanted to touch on that. There has been a significant amount of public consultation and engagement opportunities throughout the process in all the phases, starting right from the vision. WSP was really the other part of our technical consulting team who was in charge of the community engagement and engagement with our community steering committee and just generally the public. And just visiting the website, there's been over 3,300 instances of people visiting the website and participating in the process. We've had over 100 online submissions, over 700 downloads of the draft official plan, which is pretty great, actually. For all of the official plan reviews that I've been involved in, I would say that this is probably the one where people have been the most engaged. So that's certainly good to see. So now I will take you through the draft updated official plan. And I went through a similar presentation in June of last year to council, and it was really that was our first draft, and I went through in detail really the sections of the official plan. Today, I'm going to provide kind of the brief highlights of what has always been in the draft, the first draft and the second draft, as well as really focusing a little bit more on the changes from the first draft to the second draft. And that was really, if any of you were present for the March 8th last month open house, that was really the focus. Tonight's presentation is a little bit more fulsome, just to provide kind of that overall review. Next slide, please. So this slide is really highlighting some of the comments that we've received so far. We continue to receive comments up to today and going forward, and we will continue to be assessing those comments, responding to those comments, and considering further changes to the official plan based on what we've heard. Generally, from York Region, we received many comments, and we have some follow-up discussions with them. Their comments at a high level, just to summarize, are really incorporating policies on sustainable development and climate-sensitive design, addressing sensitive land uses, infrastructure, and they had several comments on updating the land use schedules and the other schedules of the official plan. From the public, we've received many comments, many requesting site-specific mapping changes for various landowners, comments with respect to intensification, affordable housing is certainly a comment that keeps coming up. Comments on having more transit supportive development around the Aurora GO station and within the major transit station area. Many comments on natural heritage and mapping of the natural heritage system in the official plan. And comments on cultural heritage landscapes that were previously shown on the previous version of the official plan. And of course, many comments with respect to mapping and generally just errors that were noticed, and many of them have been addressed in the second draft and we continue to address as we're going forward. So beginning with, right at the beginning, with the vision. So as far as changes from the existing official plan, the vision has been updated to reflect the input of the public. And as I said, we've had lots of input from the public. And really, I'd like to focus on the updates to the fundamental principles of the official plan. And this is really references to complete communities, climate change, affordable housing, recognition that Aurora stable neighborhoods are an asset to the town, but also recognizing that we need to accommodate intensification in a way that's sensitive to those stable neighborhoods, focusing on co-locating community facilities, as well as new principles focusing on parkland and connectivity throughout the town. And now the next few really the way that the presentation is structured, I'm going to take you through the various kind of major sections of the official plan, beginning with the town structure and growth management sections. So as a refresher, and this slide was in the June presentation, but I thought it was important to include again. The official plan has been updated to recognize the town structure, and we've identified strategic growth areas, including the promenade and major transit station area, the regional corridor along Yonge, and local corridors. We've included policies to promote gentle intensification within stable neighborhoods, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute. And we've updated growth projections in accordance with the region's official plan. So on this slide, we're showing what's new from the first draft to the second draft that's before you here. And I should mention, for those of you present at the March 8th open house, we're talking about the same exact document. There's been no changes since then. It's still the second draft that we're talking about. But in response to comments received, what you see here is a summary of what's changed between the previous version of the OP and the version that we're looking at today, the second draft. So we've, with respect to the town structure and growth management, we've clarified language to better connect the official plan with the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. We've provided clarification that in addition to the Aurora Promenade, the major transit station area and local corridors, growth is also to be directed to the regional corridors. That wasn't quite obvious in the first draft. We've added references to the 2021 population and employment numbers that are now available now that the 2021 census data became available between the two drafts. We've clarified in the section 3.2 of the official plan really what is meant by when we talk about intensification on the edges of stable residential neighborhoods. And again, I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail when I talk about that section of the OP. And on the schedules, we've delineated clearly now on the town structure schedule, the urban boundary, the major transit station area boundary, and we've refined the limits of the promenade and major transit station area secondary plan, residential designated growth areas, and employment areas. And Here you can see Schedule A, the town's structure plan. We've updated the color palette really to match what's on the other land use schedules, as there was a little bit of confusion there, and that came through in some of the comments. And on the previous version, the layer with the corridors actually wasn't showing up properly. It was underneath one of the layers. So now you can see the corridors on this plan. This slide again will look familiar. And as a refresher, one of the focuses of the new official plan is on design excellence. And your existing official plan and secondary plans have many good policies on design. So this section, design excellence, contains town-wide policies, really with a focus on placemaking in both the public and the private realms. Next slide, please. And so there's also a focus on Aurora being a green community, and with new policies on climate change, urban forestry management, and excess soil included within. We've also simplified the policies with respect to the town's green development and design standards. And really, the purpose of this was to avoid future required amendments to the official plan as new technologies are constantly emerging, things evolve. So we didn't want to have so much detail in the plan that it was really locking you into that. So rather, there's a policy that now refers to the standards, which can be a living document outside of the official plan and change as needed. And so what's changed with respect to design excellence and green community from the first to the second draft? We've clarified and provided links back to the region's streetscape design standards. So this was a comment that came from the region. We've added a policy to note that the town zoning bylaw will set out setback requirements for drive-through facilities. And this was a specific comment received. And now the OP is directing for that to be addressed in the zoning bylaw. We've provided clarification with respect to climate change mitigation and net zero emission objectives, which should be implemented through development. So that clarification has been made. We've added some policies to address certain technical considerations of development, including policies to enforce the town's fill bylaw to deal with excess soil and site grading, as well as we heard a comment with respect to noise attenuation along corridors. So we added a policy to say that if you're proposing a new residential development along a regional or local corridor, a noise study will be required to be submitted with that development application. And we've clarified language for the permission of 2 secondary residential dwelling units permitted per lot, as per provincial legislation. So the next topic, big topic in the official plan, is housing. Again, you'll be familiar with this slide where we've included policies on the missing middle housing types. We've included some affordable housing targets. We've streamlined the land use designation. So we've really brought forward a lot of the designations from the secondary plans into the parent official plan, as we call it. And we've added policies to permit and encourage denser housing on the edges of stable neighborhoods. Next slide, please. And so what's new with respect to housing? I want to highlight some of the proposed changes that are really being proposed still. There hasn't been much changed in terms of what's in the housing, but there will be changes forthcoming, which I'm going to speak about. So we've added an objective to ensure that a broad range of housing sizes, densities, designs, tenures, and prices be available. So this would be within the objective section. A policy to prioritize the provision of affordable housing and family-sized residential units within strategic growth areas in particular. We added a goal that a minimum of 35% of all new residential development within the Aurora GO Station MTSA. And when I say MTSA, if I do say that, that stands for Major Transit Station Area. And 25% of all new residential development in the rest of the town should meet the definition of affordable housing. We've included a variety of policies that promote the achievement of housing that's affordable for low and moderate income households, really to be and encourage those partnerships with York Region and the development community to achieve those housing targets. And one change from the previous version of the OP is that we've updated as I mentioned, the secondary residential dwelling units policies to more clearly articulate the various scenarios that might be permitted. And that's two dwellings within a main house, you could say, plus an additional dwelling within an accessory building on the same lot. We've also updated the OP to permit new denser housing forms on the edges of stable neighborhoods. So I've mentioned that a couple times already. But what this is looking at opportunities along arterial roads and collector roads within the stable neighborhoods designation, where you might be able to consider a denser housing form up to about 4 stories, with accompanying policies really stating that if you are going to apply as a landowner for denser housing forms, you have to consider a transition in height and densities to lots that are interior to the stable neighborhood. So essentially it needs to be compatible. But certainly there are some opportunities there for greater densities. And the definition of affordable housing was also updated to reflect, as I mentioned, regional policy. But going forward, one of the changes that's going to be happening is that we'll be further updating the policies to reflect council's motion to prepare an affordable housing action plan, including policies to say what should be included within that action plan. So we're looking forward to working with the town to further that and really set the groundwork for that process to unfold in the future. Yes, sorry about that. This slide looks like it's not showing up, but essentially this should be just showing, and we'll wait till it comes back up. It's essentially a slide showing the new updated land use designation schedule. And, as I mentioned, we updated the some of the delineation between the designations based on comments received. But really the main change is updating the color palette and the symbols to match previous changes made. Sounds like we're going to be looking for a document. I'll just continue on some things that I think we probably don't need a slide to look at just to not waste time. But the next matter was cultural heritage. In terms of policy changes, no real changes from the first to the second draft. However, one of the changes you'll notice is on Schedule E. Previously, on the previous version, we were showing potential cultural heritage landscapes in town. And while the policies remain in the official plan, really to set forward a process for the town to conduct future studies to look at cultural heritage landscapes and identifying them and doing those studies, we've removed, and this is based on comments received, we've removed the actual identification of the landscapes because there was a lot of confusion where they were being interpreted as actually being already identified as a cultural heritage landscape, because the rest of the items on the map are actually designated heritage properties. It shows the delineation of the heritage district. So we've moved that out of the schedule and just left it in the policies. And this is the map that we're looking at now. The next matter, as we know, we've updated, and this is where we I think probably where we're hearing many of the comments this evening and coming through. We've updated the official plan really with policy updates to be consistent with and conform to provincial and regional policy with respect to green lands and natural environmental areas. There's a new policy requirement for buffers to be determined through an environmental impact statement or hydrological evaluations. Next slide, please. And with respect to the environmental designations and the policies, some of the changes that have happened, we've clarified the meaning of minor in terms of a change to a boundary to a key natural heritage feature or key hydrologic feature. Because there's a policy that says that without an amendment to the plan, you can consider minor changes. And we've added clarification to say that it's really based on an assessment that the change will not have an adverse effect on the feature. That being said, we have received some comments on this language. And the comments say that we should go further and actually define minor in a specific way. And so that's something that we'll continue to look at. We don't want to be too vague that it is difficult to interpret what that means. So we're definitely going to continue looking at that. We've also added a policy to encourage the protection, creation, and restoration of wetlands. And this applies to municipalities, other agencies, and private landowners. And this is specific to features that are not currently identified within the environmental protection area designation. So if there was a development going through, a feature was identified either through a study or someone said, hey, there's a wetland here, or there was a wetland here. This policy is really encouraging the reinstatement of those features through development. So just to clarify that specific policy is not with respect to anything that's already designated, which are already protected features. We've also added land use policies for natural core area, natural linkage area, and countryside area from the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, and that was missing from the first draft, and it was important to really bring those policies from your secondary plan, which is OPA 48, the Oak Ridges Moraine official plan amendment, into the parent document, because those are actual land use designations that show up on Schedule B. So we wanted to make sure that they were properly reflected. And you can see here on the schedules, the boundaries of the environmental protection designation have been refined by our natural heritage consultant, North-South Environmental. And this is really to better reflect actual boundaries of features as well as lot lines that currently exist. So for example, in some of the northeastern parts of the municipality, the secondary plans on the east side of the town, a lot of the mapping reflected very conceptual lines of environmental designations prior to development occurring, which are not accurate, or were not accurate. So the updated mapping, for example, fixes those per lot lines, roads, and the actual boundary of the features. With respect to the economy, again, as a refresher, the official plan has new policies on employment conversions. These policies seem to be constantly in flux with the province and are currently proposed to change again. But the change now, as it stands, permits employment land conversions to occur outside of a municipal comprehensive review process. So, in other words, York Region's official plan update. The updated official plan consolidates and simplifies the employment land use designation. So there has been a change from when the current official plan was created to now, in that there's now no difference between an employment area, whether it's in the built boundary or whether it's within the designated greenfield area. An employment area is an employment area. So there was a duplication of many land use policies in your official plan. So we've streamlined that. And we've created a new mixed use designation in some key areas, which will require at-grade commercial uses and active street frontages, as well as policies to require appropriate transitions, of course, to low-rise buildings. Yes, sorry. Thank you. With respect to site-specific policy areas, Schedule H has been updated really not because new site-specific policy areas were added, but really just to clean up the mapping to reflect the property boundaries, but also to make sure that none of the labels were overlapping the property that applies with respect to the site-specific policy. And the Aurora Promenade and Major Transit Station Area Secondary Plan has been updated, which identifies the major transit station area. It updates the heights that are permitted, and it includes additional policies to focus density within the major transit station area, as well as policies to ensure that there is an appropriate transition in height and density to the adjacent low-rise area. So you see that's quite a theme in the official plan. And I've mentioned a couple times that we've updated the boundaries of the major transit station area. And that's really showing up on all the schedules now. There were particularly the main change was up on the north end, and it needed to include some Metrolinx owned land north of Wellington. We've also made some changes to the maximum heights for some properties, and those are summarized. I won't go through them, but those are summarized here, and that's really just the tallest buildings being with east of the tracks up to 7 stories, and then a couple properties that needed to reflect site-specific permissions. And other than the changes I just described to the height schedule, there were really no other changes to the secondary plan policies from the first to the second version of the OP. But on the next few slides, we have a series of 3D renderings that we've produced really to help everyone visualize what the policies would put into place in terms of what would be permitted within the major transit station area. So if we could go to the next slide. These are just, again, these aren't reflective of development applications, but there's merely representations, creative representations of what buildings could look like with the densities and heights that are envisioned for the MTSA. So no taller than 7 stories, and a transition to lower densities. We have the existing parking structure and the parking immediately adjacent to the station still there. Next slide, please. You can see some visuals here with the actual GO train just to help orient. So if you look at for example, in the bottom right image, this is us looking from that parking lot south of Wellington. We're looking west at the tracks and some of the buildings that would be permitted immediately on the other side of the tracks, but really dropping down in height as you get to those lower rise areas to the west. Next slide, please. And again, just some more images. Again, we're seeing a mixed use buildings, commercial at grade, opportunities for pedestrian movement, connectivity, as well as a mix of uses, not just residential and commercial, but also the image on the top right is portraying that an office building would also be permitted there and definitely encouraged. And then this area here, we're looking at the south end of the major transit station area down along Bursey Street, where you could do 3 or 4 story maximum heights, and really that interface between what it could look like in terms of a more dense form, but really that important element of transition in height and scale to the established residential area to the west. And last but not least, the secondary plans. No changes have been made further to the secondary plans, except as noted throughout my presentation tonight. For example, bringing forward some of the policies from OPA 48 into the parent document. Slide, please. I'd just like to cap off with what are the next steps? Where do we go from here? So certainly this is not the end of providing your comments. We encourage your comments as soon as possible, of course, but we're going to continue to receive comments and make revisions as necessary. And then moving into the summer and then in the fall, aiming for town council adoption, and then after which the official plan will be sent off for approval. The last slide is really important for everyone here to know how you can submit your comments beyond speaking here tonight. You can send your comments directly to Mr. Terry here, and Edward's email is up there, eterry@aurora.ca. You can go to the town's website at engageaurora.ca, or you can scan this QR code. And this presentation, if you're wondering, will be available on the town's website. So everyone can refer to that if they need to. And that concludes my presentation. Sorry, it was a little bit of a long one, but it's the official plan. think it warrants a good discussion. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Do we have some delegations to start? First up, Katrina Silva, Denton's. Welcome.
Just give me a moment to adjust. I'm not as tall. Thank you and good evening. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Katarina Sliva, and thank you, Your Worship, for that pronunciation.
I tried.
I appreciate it. I really do. I'm a municipal planning lawyer and a partner with Denton's. And I'm here today on behalf of our client, numbered company 2697331 Ontario Inc. Our client owns the lands municipally known as 1289 Wellington Street East. And you should have before you, Your Worship and Council, a letter from our office dated April the 12th, 2023, providing some comments with respect to this draft of the official plan. And I will start by saying thank you, and we appreciate an opportunity to make this submission. Our client's lands are 14.7 acres and are located on the southwest corner of Wellington Street East and Leslie Street. The lands are in proximity to the Wellington 404 Park and Ride, the Wellington GO Station, and the Bloomington GO Station. As you may know, the current regional official plan designates the lands as urban area on map 1 and community area on map 1A. The regional official plan outlines that community areas are where the majority of residents, personal services, retail, arts, culture, recreational facilities, and human service needs will be located. And it includes policy 4.2.2, which outlines what community areas are and also indicates that they shall contain a wide range and mix of housing types, sizes, tenures that include options that are affordable to residents at all stages of life, to require that local municipal official plans implement this mix and range of housing is consistent with other regional forecasts, intensification and density targets, and the objectives of the plan. The regional official plan also includes a site-specific policy, being 4.2.30, which is a special provision for the lands. It says that notwithstanding any other policies in this plan, to the contrary, the minimum density target to be achieved is 330 units per hectare and a minimum building height of 12 stories. You may recall, Your Worship and Council, that the Town General Committee report dated June 21st, 2022, indicated that in the initial draft of the town official plan, the designation for the lands would be residential, designated greenfield area, and natural heritage system on the town structure, and medium high urban residential and environmental protection on the land use schedule. The more recent, the second version of the official plan that is before you today, proposes to designate the subject lands employment area and business park instead. It also proposes a larger environmental protection area than existed and was previously shown. Respectfully, Your Worship, with these errors, the draft of the official plan does not conform with the regional official plan, and it should be revised to reflect the regional official plan policy and context. As you know, the planning framework in Ontario is a top-down framework, and as such, the town official plan must line up with the regional official plan. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to make this submission, and I trust that our comments will be taken into consideration and reflected accordingly in the next draft of the official plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Wendy Kenyon. Kenyon, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Memoracas, councillors, staff, project team, everyone. I'm Wendy Kenyon, VP of HFARA. The new official plan is obviously focusing on how we're going to grow. We need housing and everything that goes with it to ensure the town remains a place where, as they say, we can live, work, and play. But while this is extremely important, so too is the need to preserve and protect our natural heritage for a multitude of recognized scientific and economic reasons. While the new draft does go some way to provide environmental protection, unless there are further changes, critical decisions will continue to be made based on subjective argument presented by those who are seeking a certain outcome. The new draft also excludes from protection areas we believe should be protected. We're very grateful that the project team has taken time to consider HFARA's previous comments. Thank you. To be frank, many of our concerns are fueled by the fact that these days, the cards are very much stacked against our natural heritage. We have a provincial government eroding and overriding environmental regulation. And now we have as our roadmap a new regional official plan approved by only a 2/3 vote that's been highly criticized for its failure to provide proper environmental protection. However, while the town's official plan must be in sync with higher regulation, it's important to remember that according to the regional official plan itself, subsection 7.3.4, nothing prevents us from enforcing stricter policies, providing they're consistent with the general intent of the regional plan and applicable provincial plans. Therefore, we do have a last opportunity to level the playing field before it's too late. The regional official plan contains 7 major goals, including the goal to protect and enhance the natural environment for current and future generations. The provincial policy statement represents minimum standards and also says natural features and areas shall be protected for the long term. So in our opinion, this certainly enables the town of Aurora to enforce policies that provide better protection for our natural areas going forward over the next 20+ years. For example, we can further restrict permitted uses within the environmental protection or EP designation. Our existing official plan currently contains a number of contradictory policies that just aren't logical. On the one hand, it says that EP areas are intended to protect and enhance natural features and functions and should remain in their natural state. But at the same time, it allows infrastructure, stormwater management facilities and the protective buffers, and roads to be built right through the feature itself. That doesn't make sense, particularly when roads render the remaining woodland habitat too fragmented to function. Also, given the science, we believe unevaluated wetlands should also be included in the EP designation. The Natural Heritage Reference Manual, a document used during this review, suggests considering protection of these wetlands as this would, and I quote, be a way to ensure that unevaluated wetlands are not viewed imprudently as potential development areas. Perhaps our biggest concern with the draft official plan is the huge dependence on environmental impact studies submitted as part of the application process. These studies are used to determine, for example, the width of a protective buffer, whether unevaluated wetland should be preserved, whether wildlife habitat is significant, whether adjustments to boundaries of the EP designation will result in negative environmental impacts, and so on. These studies are usually carried out by the very firms representing developers, i.e. those wanting a specific outcome. This is a blatant conflict of interest and needs to change, particularly as the Conservation Authority's role here is being drastically reduced. So we're asking how these studies can be made far more objective, balanced, and accurate, seen through the lens of an impartial environmental expert instead of through the lens of a developer's paid representative or party with a similar conflict of interest. Is there such a person currently on staff? And if not, could this be the time to bring on board this high level of environmental expertise? In summary, this is a vastly changing town with significant development yet to come. And yes, we need more housing. But if we don't look after these valuable town assets, our blue and green infrastructure, while we have this final opportunity, future generations will be looking back at us and wondering, given all we knew, how our generation could have dropped the ball so badly and with such drastic and lasting consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenyon. I can always count on you being exactly 5. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Next, I have George Skouliakis. George, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Mayor Maracas. Good evening, Mayor Maracas, councilors, staff, project team, everyone. I am George Skouliakis, president of HFARA. HFARA has already made 2 submissions to the town outlining our concerns regarding the environmental policies of the draft OP. We're grateful that several of our suggested amendments have been incorporated. Unfortunately, however, we believe the latest draft still leaves the town's remaining natural heritage areas open to inappropriate development in the years to come. To put our concerns into context, we recognize that over the next 2 decades, Aurora will be under enormous pressure to accommodate a significant growth in population. Achieving this growth will bring about additional pressures to utilize every piece of available land within the urban boundary in order to prevent further sprawl. Yet, while we tackle the very real problems of housing shortages and affordability, let's not forget the fact that loss of biodiversity and climate change are 2 equally real and equally as important crises that current and future generations of Aurorans will face, particularly over the long term. Potential impacts are extensive and include increased risk of flooding, prolonged periods of severe heat, food shortages due to failed crops, pest and disease. Extensive research supports the concept that nature-based solutions are among the most cost-effective ways to tackle the dual and interconnected crisis of the changing climate and biodiversity loss. The message is clear. Protection of nature, our green and blue infrastructure must be woven into the very core of Aurora's official plan. Some key questions we'd like council to consider this evening. Firstly, how will the latest regulatory changes at provincial level, for example, Bill 23 and Bill 97, affect the quality of planning applications going forward, with LSRCA's input significantly diminished? Secondly, do the environmental impact studies compiled by environmental firms hired by developers represent a conflict of interest? Since these studies determine the scale of feasibility and a proposal, and given that the larger the developable area, the larger the profit for the developer, the answer has to be yes. This is the reason why we continue to challenge the significant powers of these hired environmental firms. On that point, at this critical time in the town's history, we believe it should be openly acknowledged that the development industry continues to exert considerable influence on planning policy and decision-making. For example, at the provincial level, MZOs have been misused to override policy, fast-tracking development on environmentally sensitive lands. As we recently seen in the instance of the Henderson lands, developers are now approaching the MMAH directly in order to bypass proper democratic process. At the regional level, the highly controversial 2022 York Region official plan was met with fierce criticism from environmental groups as being overtly pro-development. At the municipal level, here's a last opportunity to establish a balance going forward between the urgent need for more housing and the equally urgent need to protect and enhance the natural heritage. In conclusion, we know the town is destined to grow. That's a given, but we strongly believe that this needs to be done in a way that respects our natural heritage. It is possible that it's all about balance. The official plan needs to ensure key decisions will be made by those without vested interest and need, proper environmental oversight, proper protection for what we know should and must be protected through clearly written policies that present no opportunity for dubious interpretation and offer no loopholes. If we don't get it right now, the next 30 years will simply be an environmental bloodbath. Cancel. We ask you that you don't let this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Next, I have Joanna Fast, Evans Planning. Welcome, Joanna. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'll keep my presentation brief. I act on behalf of a property owner who owns 18 properties in on Yonge Street, just south of Wellington. We've reviewed the draft official plan, and my client has plans to bring in some applications for redevelopment. And we're hoping that council and staff can consider heights greater than 5 stories in that area. We understand that council has approved developments in that area of up to 7 stories or higher. And those were approved by council, not by the OLT. And so we're hoping that some modest increase in height there could be considered, especially given provincial direction for the building of more homes and building them faster. So we're hoping that that can be done through this official plan process by allowing for greater heights in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Adam Layton from Evans Planning. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Worship. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I act on behalf of TWTH Developments, Inc. They're the owner of the properties located at 252, 260, and 272 Old Bloomington Road. We've been in the process of preparing applications and having discussions with staff going back some time. We did provide our comments on the prior version of the draft official plan in July 2022. We're very happy to see that there are several responses and clarifications provided in the report and response matrix. However, one item that I would like to bring to council's attention is specific to the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan, OPA 34. It's provided in the response from staff that the secondary plan is intended to be incorporated into the parent official plan, simplified and with duplicative policy text removed. I would suggest respectfully, of course, that the initial adoption of the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan occurred in 2003, I believe, and was modified and approved by York Region in 2004. And since that time, there hasn't really been a formative review or update to the secondary plan, particularly given we're coming up on 20 years now since that secondary plan was put into force and effect. And all the changes that have occurred both at the town, the regional and provincial level in the intervening, I'll just round up 20 years. There is, I believe that there's merit in leveraging the works being undertaken by the town and by its consultant, and looking at an update to the provisions of the secondary plan concurrent with the update to the secondary plan. There would be obviously some benefit there, and would allow a more modern policy framework to be enacted for this area. That concludes my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that want to come up and speak? Klaus? Klaus, you have 5 minutes and floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity. At our first or last public meeting, I inquired about how the draft OP sets the stage for active transportation for walkability in Aurora. In the answer, it was pointed out there's a schedule that deals with that, a schedule of active transportation, labeled active transportation. In the meantime, I have made it my business to have a closer look at our draft OP. While I obviously could not review all of the approximately 300 pages, I concentrated on active transportation. But I should mention that I was pleased with community gardens now having become a permissible use in neighborhood and community parks. And with active transportation and trails showing having been moved into the transportation-related sections of the OP away from recreation. I have the following remarks relative to how this draft OP fits into the shift from car dependence to self-propelled modes of transportation to walkability in Aurora. In the introductory remarks, building a greener community, there's no mention of establishing policies that bring about a shift away from car dependency to self-propelled modes of transportation to active transportation. Even though over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions are caused by car traffic, I think we need to pay much more attention to that. Anyway, the objectives include a bare mention of the transportation network's importance in GHG, greenhouse gas reduction efforts. Under active transportation and Aurora Trail networking objectives of the plan, there is mention that the town's active transportation network is shown on Schedule K, which is the schedule that was referred to in the last meeting. Then under Aurora Trails network policies, it is pointed out that Schedule K of this plan shows the Aurora Trails network conceptually as recommended in the Town of Aurora Trails Master Plan. Surely Schedule K, an operative component of the OP, is meant to guide prospective developers and council as to where active transportation is to take place. Schedule K should not deal with concepts, but with the various type of routings and connections between these routes to form a well-connected active transportation network, which includes trails, complete streets, and crossings of major traffic arteries, streams, and rail corridor, as well as needed cut-throughs over private property. Schedule K in its present design is woefully short of being the operative planning instrument that it is made out to be in the text of this draft OP. And I'm going to just put these things on the overhead. That is Schedule K. This is when you, I'm sorry, I should speak into this. This is when you look at the Trails Master Plan and compare it to Schedule K. And the red dots you see on here are all the dots that I had to put in for trails missing that are supposed to be in the Trails Master Plan and Schedule K for that matter, and the crossings of railroads, etc. All of these things have red dots on this map. Yeah, there you see red dots all over the place. The other one. That is one half of Schedule K. And that is the other half.
Boss, I'm gonna give you an extra 30 seconds because of all the map changing, but if I can just get you to wrap up.
Now.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, in the town of, if the town of Aurora is keen on effecting a shift away from car dependence, then Schedule K needs to be used as the principal policy tool to get us there, as the operative tool. We have to get away from making grand statements of the values of active transportation and trail network, and from conceptual designs to implementation-oriented and enabling planning language and tools. Schedule K can indeed become an operative schedule, but it needs a lot of more details. With that done, the OP can indeed set the stage for Aurora to become a healthy and connected community. Those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Any other members of the public? You want to come for a second time, George? Just 1 second. Is there any members for the first time? Come up, Jennifer. How are you? However. Jennifer, I can just get you to state your name. You got 5 minutes.
I am not going to be that long.
But I'm giving you 5 minutes.
I'm very concerned. Somebody just came up and spoke about somebody owning 18 properties south of Wellington in this town. As you know, I've lived in this town.
I need you to.
I've lived in this town nearly 40 years. The historical part of this town started to be demolished when the original new library was built. If somebody wants 7-story buildings on 18 buildings or properties in this town, are you tearing down the town? Like, what is the plan here? I am concerned, not just for myself. I look at what Newmark has done with Main Street. They have kept the heritage of that site. They have built around it, and it's growing like crazy. Infrastructure, okay. But for you to, okay, north of Wellington, so you was going up 7 stories. There's not a whole lot that's really new there. That's been in the works. But to change the core of this town, the historical part, it's, I think, unconscionable. So that's my statement.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any other members of the public? First time? George?
Is the mic on?
Yep, mic's on.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Marakis. In addition to my 2 questions during the delegation, I have 2 additional questions, if I may. And the one is, can we have Schedule A up, please? One is in reference to Schedule A. Schedule A is the town structure. Is that too big? All right. This way. I've noticed in Schedule A, the Case Woodlot, and the on Barclay Smith lands. The Case Woodlot is this property here, and the on Barclay Smith lands are to the south between the rail tracks and the sort of the area highlighted in I guess yellow. On the schedule, it states that those are residential designated greenfield areas. So my question, residential designated greenfield area. So my question is, I'm somewhat puzzled at that designation. And I was wondering if, and also concerned. So I was just wondering if someone can comment on that. Why were they redesignated from their previous designation? Question number 2, or the other question I have is regarding the promenade and MTSA section. It's my understanding going through it that the maximum lot coverage section has been removed altogether. So I'm just wondering, the previous lot coverage, it read that the maximum lot coverage by a building or buildings on lots shall be 90%. The minimum should be 50%. That section, that policy has been removed. So I'm just wondering what the new coverage is for the promenade. And if I may, one more final question. David just spoke about the population projections for the town. Now that we have the census for 2021. According to the February 2023 official plan release, the growth from 2021 to 2051 is 20,900. I think I just want some more information on that, just because obviously the numbers have changed slightly. I just wanted to know if we're on the path of that. Can someone justify what the growth is? Because I think the previous growth was something like 24,000. I could be off a little bit. 24,700 was the previous growth, but now we're at 20,900. So it's been reduced. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Romano, can you explain the redesignation, or have they been redesignated in regards to Case Woodlot and Bartlett Smith Lines?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. They're not proposed to be redesignated. I did catch those in the last version. I'm not sure if the new maps have been updated, but those two properties in question were identified as environmental protection areas in our previous plan, and that's just a mapping error. We're not proposing to change those, so you'll see the change. If it hasn't already happened in the next version, they will revert back to the previous EPA area. With respect to
Lot coverage.
And Edward, you could correct me, but the lot coverage with respect to the promenade was proposed to be removed from the original draft. The thinking behind that is, again, lot coverage and some of those development standards really should be in the zoning bylaw, document. And so the guiding principles with respect to the promenade are number one is the actual intensification area, urban design policies, and our restrictions with respect to the heights, as well as parking rates.
Thank you. And Mr. Riley, did you want to answer the one about the population forecast? It's coming. There it is. It's on.
There we go. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to George. So the 20,900 represents the change from the 2021 population to 2051. I believe the number that you were referring to was because in the previous version, we had the 2016 population number. So the change from 2016 to 2051 reflected the 24,000 approximately. So that's the change there. We're just reflecting the most accurate information from the census.
Thank you.
Additional comment on the first matter?
Sure.
Very quickly. George, on Schedule A, I just want to clarify, these aren't land use designations. These are just elements of town structure. So Case Woodlot and the other property you mentioned are outside of the built boundary, but within the urban area. Therefore, and they're not employment designated. Therefore, they're designated greenfield area. I think a change needs to happen to Schedule A to say that it's not residential designated greenfield area. It's just the element of town structure is that it's a greenfield area. But on Schedule B, the land use designation, the environmental protection designation, those are actually reflected on Schedule B. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. And Jennifer, just, I guess I'll answer one question. You didn't really ask a question, but you kind of made mention of it. But yeah, so I just want to let you know that we have actually designated 15 properties right in that core to make sure that they're protected from a heritage perspective. So I just want to let you know that we've already done that. Okay. Any other members of the public? Okay, I'm gonna go with Klaus. You can come. Yeah, Klaus, and then I'll go with Wendy. It's coming on in a sec. There, it's on. There you go.
Okay, thank you. I had a slide up or presentation up earlier on. I'd like to go back to that. Yeah, what you see there is a result of a survey that was done during the development of the Trails Master Plan 12 or 13, over 13 years ago. It was late 2010s. Anyway, it's 13, 14 years old. Then there's this one shows where people were walking, either on sidewalks or on roads. I think maybe cycling as well. Yeah, it's about walking and cycling. Okay, now you have a question following right onto that question is, would you switch to trails to conduct these activities if they were available? You see on this presentation that 96% would switch. That information was held from us as members of that Trails Committee. I more or less squeezed this thing out of somebody who I thought would have it, namely the consultants who took in this information and now have it. We had trouble convincing, town officials and consultants that we should have off-road trails in the system, like a network of trails through green corridors and so on. And the evidence was there that that is what people want, but it wasn't given to us. We are now into another phase, active transportation. I'm aiming to see the same thing happening here, meaning mostly off-road. We should try and do whatever we can to connect the green spaces we have in town, to link them, not only for our purposes, but for animals and for nature itself, basically. And that is why I support so much George's and the lady before him with presentations. We should be aiming for that. And we can't aim for that if we don't have this on a map. And this is the type of support you have. In the recent Recreation Master Plan development, we have another evidence that people like walking and hiking. See it up there. Maybe we can enlarge this. We can read it. Okay, there. 81% of the survey under the Recreation Master Plan found, the respondents found that walking and hiking is the most popular parks and recreation activity. We should be paying attention to these things. People want nature. They want walk opportunities, but not on sidewalks. If we had intended to develop basically a master plan on sidewalks, we didn't need any consultant or study or any development time. We could do that by looking at the town street map. In the Ward 1 meeting, with Councillor Reese being in the chair, we had input from the people around the table. And it wasn't me who put walkability at the top of that list. And we had other things that connected to nature and so on. We should be paying plenty more attention to this and providing funds. My hope is that because we've moved trails and active transportation into the transportation corridor, that we could consider them to be hard surface items in the budget process and make them an equal of motorized traffic. We're not doing that. We are car-centered to the nth degree, and we need to change those things. So I'm just adding this as information for you.
Thank you, Klaus. Any other members of the public? Wendy, did you want to come up a second time? Okay.
Can you hear me? Well, I can't look at you and speak into the microphone. Okay. A quick question. It's regarding the Greenland system, section 12, subsection 12.3.3b. The draft says, in determining of a change in a boundary of a key natural heritage feature or key hydrologic feature is minor, the determination shall be based on an assessment that the change will not have a net adverse effect on the key natural heritage feature or key hydrologic feature and its functions. We're a little concerned about the word net because at the beginning of these discussions, we were advised that there would be no offsetting in the official plan. And the word net to us sounds alarm bells that somewhere either there'll be a misunderstanding that, you know, you can plant X number of trees over here and it will allow you to move the boundaries. So we're wondering if we could just take out the word net and just present this phrase so that it shows that the boundary of a key natural heritage feature or key hydrologic feature, it's minor if there's no net, sorry, I beg your pardon, there's no adverse effect rather than using the word net. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. George, you're up for a third time? Okay, and we're and not to we just don't want to get into a back and forth. We're just question after question after question. This is more, yeah. Okay.
Regarding the question on Schedule A, Case Woodlot, and on Barclay Smith lands, I just checked that the Case Woodlot was designated Greenland System EP, right? And I was just told that the on Bartley lands now are EP. I think in the previous schedule, it was public parkland. Can you explain the difference between public parkland and EP, please? Thank you.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, David was correct, our consultant, when he identified that the Schedule A, a town structure, identifies designated greenfield areas. I've had a discussion with staff with respect to, for that very same reason, that someone could identify the Casewood lot and the Ann Bartley lot as perhaps having residential development potential, because in our earlier official plans, they both had different designations. And just looking at Schedule B, which is our actual land use plan, the Ann Bartley Smith has an environmental protection area, and the Casewood lot has a well, I'll ask Edward to step in. I don't have a copy of the old plan. Ann Bartley Smith has an EP designation, and the Edward to clarify the Casewood lot. It also has either an Oak Ridges Marine Natural Core Area designation based on the shading here. So again, both of those properties do not have any development rights under our official plan.
Edward, did you want
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Marco was right as far as the two properties. The Casewood lot is proposed to be Oak Ridges Marine Natural Core Area, and the Barclay property is environmental protection.
Thank you. Mr. Romano? What's the difference between public parkland and EP?
So I'm not sure what version of the plan identified it as public parkland, but public parkland is simply identifying lands that are under public ownership where active or passive recreational uses are permitted, playing fields, etc. An environmental protection area would not permit those type of uses, and typically they could be either in private ownership or in public ownership.
And Wendy, to answer your question, staff will look into that that language. Okay. Thank you. Any other members of the public? I want to close the public portion of this meeting. Council recommendations that report number PDS 23-041 be received. And 2, that comments presented at the public meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services for considerations in the final draft official plan and a report to a future general committee meeting. Someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Weiss, second by Councillor Gilliland. Comments or questions? Thanks, John. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to some of the comments, but first I'd like to know, I'd like to say in hold on, sorry. In the vision, I guess the general question is, why does it seem like environmental protection has decreased in both the introduction, the importance in both the introduction and in the vision statement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
and we can ask David to come up as well, but under the vision, we have a number of fundamental principles and themes. And of course, first one is proposing a responsible growth management, but again, building a greener community, protecting the greenland system. I mean, these are all key topics that are going to lead the direction of the future growth and development, again, in a balanced and responsible manner of the municipality. Again, I'm not.
I should be more
clear about
specific. I should be more specific. I'm looking at 2.0, the vision. The first paragraph, the last line, it takes out, it says, did say protects the town's natural environment and historic character. So why would we cross out natural environment in our vision? I mean, natural environment is so important.
Mr. Riley?
This is on. So yeah, we were, I guess we were looking at changing the wording a little bit, but also you can see there's some additional text added, including providing access to a well-connected natural heritage system. Really just making sure that the vision was balanced with all of the, the different goals of the town in terms of promoting growth. I can see your comment. It's certainly something that we can look at further to see if we can not strike it out or work it in somewhere, particularly within that first paragraph. But it's something that we can look at.
Councillor?
Right. The word sustainability is in there, but sustainability, that's a good word to use for climate change. But with respect to the environment, I think the word is protection. Thank you. 12.3.1, the intent. It's about, it deals with stormwater facilities. The change deals with stormwater facilities. I'd like to see it change to stormwater facilities that are located outside of the feature. The way it reads now, it doesn't, there could be some misunderstanding because the word appropriately is used. Appropriately is subjective. And I believe the intent is to locate outside of the feature. Could I have a comment on that back?
Riley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardner, you're correct. That is the intent. And I think maybe we can look at some improved wording there, because certainly that's what's reflected in the policy. So we could definitely look at clarifying that in the intent.
Thank you, because as members of council know, a lot of the concerns that arise here have to do with planning. So the clearer we can make our planning document, the better. Thank you. In 12.3.2, I'm looking at part A, the third point. And I would like the wording to read, if possible, erosion control projects only within the buffer areas. I would like that to be added. Right now it says erosion control projects only if the projects have been demonstrated to be necessary. But I would, I think the intent is erosion control projects only within the buffer areas, not within the heritage feature. And it's not clear from the way the wording is there.
I think they'll look into that, Counselor, for you and make sure.
Thank you. Something that was mentioned by one of the delegates in 12.3.2 is number 4. It says, well, it doesn't say, but these are very important areas, EP areas. Why would we want to have roads and stormwater management facilities in EP areas? I think that infrastructure, roads, and stormwater management facilities should be, they should just be prohibited.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll certainly take all these comments under consideration, but with respect to the provision for infrastructure and roads, again, as Mr. Riley mentioned, within the policies, in that one specifically, it does speak to, provided the need is demonstrated through an environmental assessment. So there are a certain number of very rigorous tests that would have to be met. And again, this is similar language in regional planning documents as well as provincial planning documents. Something we can certainly look at making any revisions where we feel necessary. We'll take those under consideration.
Counselor?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno. Why would we need roads in environmental protection areas?
Mr. Romano?
What would be the purpose?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, I can't think of any that we've been through here, but it could happen where there could be perhaps not a municipal road, but perhaps a regional a road, a provincial road that is deemed to be in the public interest. And again, there is a very significant environmental assessment process that would have to be followed.
Counselor?
Thank you. Thank you. There was also a question of the use of minor, and I also sent that in to you and to Edward. Could we have a definition of minor?
Counselor, I'm right.
So this is minor adjustments or refinements to boundaries.
Counselor, I'm going to, as your last question, because you're over 5.
Do we get 5 and 5?
Yes. So what was that question? You want to know the difference or why it's?
Okay, I'll leave that for now. Do I get another question instead?
No, that was the question you're asking. Then I'm going to give you even more time. So we can either finish that one last question there that you were finishing, or I'm going to cut you off and go off to the next person, next counselor.
Well, I would like an answer to that. I think we need to certainly define minor better than just saying.
What
minor.
Section was this again?
12.3.3.
This is in the definition of minor.
E and F, I believe.
In regards to
Well,
minor.
it appears more than once in the OP.
Sure enough.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't believe we have a definition. I know the Conservation Authority within the Oak Ridges Moraine section deem minor or major to be any site alteration or new development over 500 meters. Again, it's something 500 square meters. Again, it's something that we'll take a look at.
And also if you could add the term generally, what that means.
Okay, I'll get
Thank
you on
you.
your second time, Counselor. Counselor Weiss,
Pardon?
I'll get you on your second time, I said. No. No, I'm not gonna get it. Counselor Weiss, go ahead.
I can go. Okay, thank you. With respect to the vision, I share Councillor Gartner's strikeout there. You also have struck out historic character. So I just hope you consider that as well as an important part of the vision. The other thing that I had seen throughout this is the focus on connectivity and walkability. And Mr. Wehrenberg was quite right about the top three things. The other third thing that was top was gathering spaces. And I see a couple of references in there for gathering spaces, and I want to make sure that's not lost as well. In the active transportation section, and appears in a number of different places, we don't see any mention of referral to the active transportation and traffic. Now, I realize we have those new committees there. Maybe they came on after this, but I think there should be some consideration of the people who are working on these committees for active transportation. So when roads and subdivisions, et cetera, are being put in, that active transportation is considered, and the committee will have a chance to look at this, because we do this in other ways. So we'll get some resident input at that time as well. And with respect to the trails, there is a lot to unpack, and it appears in a number of different areas, but we've invested a lot in that. And as Mr. Wehrenberg has said before, that this is a longstanding value in our community. And it's suggested specifically that there are missing links. And the missing links, I'm not sure what the context of those missing links were, but I suspect that they may be missing links of active transportation between schools and residences, and GO and the transportation corridors. But also, I think an important missing link is, and I think Mr. Wehrenberg was trying to identify those when he put up the map on the secondary plan, are the connectors that occur from east to west. Because the east to west connectors are very important, because we're bisected by the railroad. And so that limits an awful lot of transportation from east to west. And I know it'll be an investment for us to do that, but if we want to have a truly connected community, then I think we need to move in some direction to start looking at the connectivity by trails from east to west and west to east, back and forth throughout that whole area of our trains, or the train tracks. There's a standard in there. It's 1 hectare per 1,000 people. And I know we do these 1 hectare of trails per, and 1 court, 1 ice surface, et cetera, per 1,000. Can you give us an idea of what we're at right now? Are we overbuilt, underbuilt? Are we right on key there?
Mr. Moreno, do you have that right now?
So, Mr. Mayor, with respect to our the amount of trails that we have, no, I don't have that handy. Number of trails in linear kilometers.
One hectare per 1,000. Are we meeting that, or are we?
That I don't know. I'll have to get back to you unless Edward has that.
Councillor, we'll get that info.
It'll just be interesting to know whether we're behind or ahead on that. Pedestrian travel is also discussed in here significantly. And to promote pedestrian traffic, and I've had this because Ward 1 is 1/2 of Yonge Street. And I think it's a very important concept that we have to promote pedestrian traffic down into the core and in our business areas. So they talk about awnings and canopies and being allowed there. And I can recall during numbers of our Snowmageddons that people couldn't travel there because all the snow and everything was on the pedestrian area. If we truly want to have an active downtown, I think we need to promote the use of downtown from a pedestrian standpoint. So I wanted to make that comment, that I was happy to see it. The other thing that's in here that we haven't spoken about is the affordable and attainable housing. And I was interested to see what in the glossary, what the definition of affordable and attainable housing is. And all I ask is to identify where the definition of affordable / attainable housing came from, because it's both in rentals as well as the purchase of properties. Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
to the.
And I'll ask Mr. Riley if he wants to expand upon what I said, but it's as per the region's definition, which is roughly, I think right now about 550, maybe 600,000. And the region looks at from an income standpoint, medium income. Mr. Riley, is that good? Yep. Okay.
Is that likewise for the rentals as well?
Yeah, they do.
Because it's
They do the same kind of
125.
calculations for
125% of the median range.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't seem to me to be affordable. If the median is here and we're allowing 125% more and still calling it affordable, meaning you're probably 10 or 20% above what the median is. So I'm just asking. Oh, we got time. Sorry.
It goes quick.
I have another one, but we'll get to it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Weiss. You cover a lot there. I'm just going to follow up on something that Councillor Weiss had touched on, because that's part of my question as well, when respect to the affordable housing. Funnily enough, we're talking about the 550 to 600K. However, it does state in here from low to moderate income, which I would not at all put low income in that category at all. So I am curious as to the kind of language that we put in there, specifically because there's some changes that we are asking for 35% of all new development in the major transit area to be affordable, whatever that definition is that we put in our OP. And I guess through you, Mr. Ramuno, as far as the major transit area and the expectation with the growth and accommodating 35%, with that balance of height that we have reduced in that area, is that really an attainable goal for us to be able to provide that kind of housing in that designated area?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and David and Ed could jump in if I misstep here. There are a couple issues or questions here with respect to the affordable housing. We have a number of targets in the official plan, and they've been there. The one was the policy in all official plans that dates back to, I believe, the late 80s, early 90s, that identified 25% of all housing to be provided in a municipality should be affordable. Unfortunately, there are no tools that were provided to the local municipalities with respect to, how to actually achieve that. Because we aren't a housing provider, the region is. And again, we rely on the province and the region to actually come up with those thresholds, and the affordable housing definition in our official plan, again, hasn't really changed much. It's been there in the last few versions of the official plan. Basically speaks to, housing, the purchase price of housing shouldn't exceed more than 30% of a gross annual household income. Again, we don't have the tools to necessarily deliver on those. The best thing we can do as a municipality and council is, number one, we're mandated to include these targets in here, but to ensure that we provide enough land supply and diverse housing within the municipality to meet our long-term population employment forecasts. And I believe we have done that in the earlier plan and this plan. This plan, we've expanded the major transit station area. So based on our calculations, and the regional plan was approved, long-term, our 2051 30-year planning horizon target for Aurora is 85,000 people. And based on our land supply, even within our promenade and major transit station area, we can certainly exceed those numbers. It's going to take time. The question of, are those housing units going to be affordable? Again, we don't necessarily have those tools. We are looking at preparing a housing action plan so we can more closely monitor and identify opportunities, land opportunities, where we can deliver on some of these affordable housing opportunities. But again, we're waiting for the provincial regulations with respect to, setting those new thresholds with respect to, what is affordable in the town of Aurora. But again, I think this, previous council and this council has done a good job in identifying the land supply and providing a diverse range of housing units, and that a good portion of those will get close, we'll get closer in achieving those affordable or attainable housing targets.
Counselor?
Thank you. Interesting. I know there's a lot more work to be done. Looking at the height restrictions that we have right now, it's no secret I've always been a big proponent of more height in the major transit area because we are trying to attract people into a core where it is easy to take public transportation. But yet we have reduced the height, especially in an area that's right across from the GO station. And I just have a hard time understanding why we've done that. I don't know why we wouldn't be honoring a little bit more height there and doing more steps.
Reducing it in the MTSA.
No,
Are you talking about the
just,
south end?
I'm talking about on Bursey Street, how it's a lot lower than just the southern part and also across the street. There was some sort of statement that was made that we've made some revisions to allow more intensification, that's shouldering on stable neighborhoods. And I was under the impression that if we were to introduce a lot more height, say 6, 7 stories, and we'd be respectful in doing a step back, and that would be kind of a responsible way. But what I've seen here, we're doing a maximum of 5 stories across from a GO station, which you're right there. And I'm just curious as to looking at the plan now and looking down in the future, where are we extending that height beyond if we are not accommodating the kind of housing that we need? I just foresee that Performa will play a role in the kind of housing that we are going to build at 5 stories. It's definitely going to be a lot more expensive than 500, 600,000 K. I don't think we're going to be able to make those numbers meet. And I'm trying to understand and find that balance between the two. Is through you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Ramuno, is there a reason why we didn't look at that?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, we didn't lower any heights. We did increase some of the heights. We expanded the major transit station area. Again, that was approved by the region as part of their official plan. So, but we haven't lowered any heights. You reference, we do have a hierarchy of building heights. They haven't changed from the 2010 version, primarily along the Yonge Street corridor, immediately south of Wellington. The maximum heights are 5 stories there. Within the major transit station area, the GO station just west of the tracks and west of Bursey, that is identified as yellow. So the maximum height is 5. And the reason that, hasn't changed, we've held that from the 2010 official plan, is because of the transitioning to the established residential area to the west. Laremont Street and beyond the Old Town Park. And again, we do have, as part of the Promenade secondary plan policies, we do have strong urban design guidelines that will need to be adhered to, at the development application stage.
Counselor?
Thank you. And I've seen a few applications come in that were at a much higher height consideration. While I, don't think that I'm interested in seeing 10 stories per se, I do think there is room for a stepped transition, whether it be up 7 stories and back down to the 4 or 5 story. I just foresee that this is an area that we should be looking at where we are encouraging people who don't have cars that they can walk across the street and use the GO. I'm just trying to understand the Performa part of it. If we are looking at trying to increase our green space and trails and all this open space, one place where you can go up is the major transit area. And so for me, I don't really have an issue with exploring, more of that in that area for that reason. One last question in regards to the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. A gentleman in the crowd had asked about, has the town did any additional policies to reflect the environmental studies that would have been handled by the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority through Mr. Mayor and Mr. Ramuno? Is that something that we have stipulated within our OP?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of questions there. So within our official plan, there are requirements at the development stage. If there are any environmental features adjacent or on the subject property, that environmental impact study would have to be prepared and peer reviewed and determined to determine no adverse impact. And it would actually identify a more refined boundary. Those technical studies, like any technical studies, are either reviewed by staff who have that expertise or are contracted out to third parties with the expertise. With respect to the question regarding the Bill 23 and the Conservation Authority's role, that has changed. So we can no longer rely on the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority to review our natural heritage evaluation reports. So we would then have to, there are a couple options. We're actually exploring, with the region and our N6 partners, retaining, hiring staff with that expertise to conduct those reviews within the region, specifically for the N6 and our partners, our neighboring municipalities. We would share that staff resource. Until that time happens, we will then circulate those reports to a third party credentialed professional to conduct those reviews.
Counselor?
Thank you very much. Does staff have any response to the delegate about the addressing the discrepancy at 1289, the Wellington and Leslie Street? If you can maybe speak to that, that would be great.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I'll say at this point is, we'll take all the comments that we've heard tonight and we've heard throughout this process under consideration before we provide a final draft for council's consideration. That particular application is in front of the Ontario Land Tribunal, and there's a hearing scheduled January 2024. But again, their comments are duly noted, and we'll take those under consideration as we move forward.
Counselor?
Thank you. Finally, and I'm just going back to the MTSA area. No, actually the promenade area. And I noticed in regards to the height, we do have some buildings that currently have 7 stories too. And in fact, and I just wondered how, right now, I think we maxed that at 5 stories. So has precedence not been set?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have, as through official plan amendment applications, there have been a number of site-specific applications that have been approved either by council or the tribunal, and they would show up on schedule H or J. H, I believe, our site-specific schedule, which identifies previous official plan amendments that have been approved either by council or by the tribunal.
Counselor, that's fine.
Okay, I'll just go back to that second time then.
Counselor Gallo?
Thank you. First of all, just quickly to Councillor Reese and the trails and the east-west connections across the rail. As we know, we're a town that's bisected, and there was a lot of discussion and a motion put forward by myself to deal with that. Unfortunately, it wasn't approved, mainly due to finance and the costs, which I respect. But if that's put on the floor again, I have full support to move forward on any one of those east-west connections. As far as I'm still going through the document, and I appreciate all the input from the public and landowners. I just wanted to quickly respond to the delegate regarding 1289 Wellington Street East. There's one thing that I do agree with what she said, that errors were made. The first error is that the region converted those lands outside of an MCR process, which was an error on their part. The second, the minister stepping in and I guess moving things forward, notwithstanding what this council wanted to do. That was an error in my view. And the third error was our own, that we inadvertently mapped that area incorrectly at the GC meeting that the delegate was referring to, and that was quickly changed back to its current designation of employment lands. And as far as I'm concerned, that should remain as it is. Speaking to that, 3.13 local corridors, we've removed second to last sentence there, and it refers to local corridors in Aurora consisting of portions of Wellington Street, Bayview, unless the outside of the promenade and major transit area. Generally, these areas are made up of residential properties and existing commercial areas. And we removed near the bottom other non-commercial uses during the further, it is not anticipated that these existing uses will be converted to other non-commercial uses during the 2031 planning horizon. Could someone just explain why we removed that?
Yeah. Mr. Riley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gallo. So that was removed. I mean, certainly what we're trying to do with the local corridors is recognize that there's opportunity here for intensification. And so that statement saying that further it is not anticipated that these existing uses will be converted to other non-commercial uses during the 2031 planning horizon, that might be the case as we're nearing 2031. It's 2023 now. However, we have to remember the plan now is to a 2051 horizon. So we don't want to limit policy to 2031. And we are directing intensification in part to local corridors. So we do think that there is definitely opportunity to intensify those lands and that the non-commercial uses may be intensified, or sorry, that those commercial properties might be converted to non-commercial uses.
Councillor?
So through Mr. Mayor, the previous OP was basically saying that it's not anticipated for those lands to be converted to non-commercial uses. Now we're saying that, yes, that's a possibility, and we agree that it's a possibility.
Right.
Okay. In 3.4, similarly, under the employment areas, we've removed that last section. Further, it is not anticipated that these lands will be converted to other use during the 2031 planning horizon, and further, it is not anticipated that these existing areas will be converted to other non-employment generated uses during the 2031 planning horizon. Same idea?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gallo, similar idea, a little bit different in that now provincial policy and the region's official plan allow for conversions outside of an MCR process. So it is possible that that conversion could be brought forward. Not to say that it's going to be automatically supported, because obviously there's a review that needs to happen, but we wanted to make sure that was clear in the policy.
Councillor?
I just want to confirm that. In 4.0, promoting responsible growth, we removed the proper phasing of growth is as important as growth itself. The urban sprawl, leapfrogging, or scattering growth with inadequate services, inappropriate densities, or land use makes inefficient use of land and municipal resources. It is the intent of the plan to ensure that the Aurora growth is well planned and responsibly managed. We've removed that. We know why? Does that not hold true today?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gallo. So in reading this section, when this was, I'm not sure exactly how long that existing policy has been there, but we're looking at an Aurora today that is pretty much built out. And so really, when we're talking about leapfrogging, if you were considering Aurora as it once was, where you've got the built up area, and then you have some big, large designated greenfield areas, and not developing those far off lands first, it's really trying to go out in a phased approach. We've really at a point now where we've reached the edges more or less. So we just didn't think that this part of the policy was required.
Councillor?
Okay. Under 4.1 community structure, that last section is also, well, the whole section is removed. Could you just explain why all of 4.1 under community structure, all of those items are removed?
Mr. Riley?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gallo. So most of these policies are actually now, and I'm just trying to make sure that I refer to the correct section, in section 3. of the official plan, which we created really to bring those town structure policies out into kind of their own town structure chapter. We thought that was a better place for it rather than in section 4.
Okay, so they're not removed, they're replaced
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah, we go it that way because it actually is a strikeout. It is moved, but it is stricken from this section.
Mr. Riley, if there are, and just sorry, Councilor, to interrupt, if there are other areas where similar things are happening, maybe just for council's benefit and maybe for the public, you could identify those within the draft plan, just so we can be pointed to where they're actually been moved.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. I
Thank you.
believe we have a version actually that we can work on where we noted those. It was more for internal purposes, but we
Okay.
can. We'll
I think
of a
that would
way
be
to
helpful
do that.
for everybody, including the public. Councilor, good point. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just my last point, there's many other, and I hope there will be more opportunities for us to discuss this. There was a comment by one of the delegates that spoke to having consultants hired by developers and the issues that delegate mentioned. Is that commonplace throughout the province? Are there other ways of addressing those types of concerns that you may be aware of? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Riley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gallo. Yes, it's certainly common. Just my personal experience, even we have clients like the town of Aurora, but we also have clients that are developers and working as part of a consulting team on development applications. Often there is an environmental consultant on board who's preparing an EIS. From my personal experience, I know that their work often changes the development. I've been involved in many projects where the architect proposes one thing, it's before that the EIS is prepared, and the EIS, the draft EIS is completed and actually revises the design because that environmental consultant cannot support a change that might have been desired by the applicant. So that does happen. I know that some people might not think that, but it does. But Mr. Ramuno spoke to the peer review process. Yes, it's paid by the developer, but the peer reviewer is hired by the municipality. So the client is the town of Aurora. It's just the cost is passed on to the developer. So it shouldn't, in my opinion, it shouldn't be looked at another consultant hired by the developer. It is the town employing on contract another environmental consultant to peer review an application with respect to the environment. And yes, that fee is passed on. But in my opinion, that should often there's many conflicts that arise and back and forth, many reports. And that's certainly something that you see in almost every municipality, I would say, has similar policies. And Mr. Ramuno also mentioned as another option, it sounds like the region and some partner municipalities are looking at hiring some staff that would be able to review those studies. So I think that's great. Hopefully that something comes out of that.
Thank you. Councilor, you're fine.
Okay.
Just letting you know. Thank you. Councilor Reese, second time.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to just get some questions here. You have in the strategic growth areas, you've identified that there are 8 suggestions. And one of them has suggestions that use wording, and you use this throughout. In some cases you use shall, and sometimes it's promote, something a little grayer than black and white. Shall is we will do that. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know where that lies. Is that with us saying we will versus we will promote? Maybe that should go to Mr. Riley.
Mr. Riley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Weiss. Yeah, certainly there's different times. I think it would be great if you have specific policies that you think, why did we use shall there versus promote? I'd be happy to take a look at those. Often, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but yeah, it's something that I can certainly look at if you do have specific questions.
Thank
Councillor?
you. Thank you. One of the suggestions was to take a look and use the town's inventory of land as one of the items for these strategic growth areas. And maybe to Mr. Ramuno, do we have an inventory? I know, sorry, it's a bad question. we do have an inventory of town-owned lands. Is that sufficient to do the work that we need to do, in your opinion, with respect to affordable housing?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a start. Obviously, as part of our developing the housing action plan, we'll identify property that the town owns, but we'll also identify other properties that may have not been identified, within our official plan. Again, at the official plan level, the scale, we provide land use designations, our strategic growth areas, our major transit station area. But again, the housing action plan will identify other opportunities. It could be lands owned by the municipality, by other groups, private landowners, et cetera. And the other key thing there is also to identify, once we have those affordability threshold figures, some other goals with respect to, monitoring the absorption rate of new housing that gets built and developed, and monitor that over the years to ensure that we are, on track with our long-term targets, because they will go up and down over the years.
Counselor?
Great. That answered my second question on that anyway. The other item in here is a focus on secondary dwellings, and that becomes an issue in this community because Bill 23 encourages more densification. But the issue here has to be, I would suggest maybe policies that are put in place to identify these secondary dwellings that are being built, and to be able to monitor them and to also inspect them, because there are property standards at risk here, and safety and comfort of residents. So I just wanted to bring that forward to you. In there also around it references construction around the rail lines. And of course, we're going to be going through that over the next 2 to 3 years or 4 beyond. But one very interesting thing in there was it suggests that noise and vibration studies should be, again, this is a should, as opposed to us saying will be done, because particularly along Bursey Street and others where there's going to be some significant construction of large developments, it's important for those older houses in that area. So again, it's a wording, and I'm wondering if we can just have the consultant consider those as being a shall as opposed to a should.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is special study areas, and I'm not familiar. I know we have community impact plans and interest plans and the rest of it, because we have a secondary plan called the Promenade Study. But I'm in particular interest in the Young and Edward Street intersection there that has potential for a lot of development on. And is that through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno or to Mr. Riley? Is that an example of where we have a special study area where we want to make sure that certain aspects of that corner are considered from both a residence and a retail standpoint?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, and I believe our previous plan did identify a section, a couple sections within the promenade as special study areas in the mapping. I think that's one change to the mapping. They're not referred to as special study areas, but the policies, and David and Edward could jump in, the urban design guide policies are still included in the body of the official plan, the secondary plan portion of the promenade, to ensure that at the development application stage, that those special urban design criteria are adhered to, such as the proper transitioning from existing low-rise development, design of the building, the build form, et cetera.
Great.
Counselor?
Thanks. That's great news. And the last one, I promise, is it makes mention about the Planning Act and communication. And we've had a couple of circumstances recently where we've done what the Planning Act says we're supposed to do, but we still have complaints from and legitimate complaints from residents that they didn't know, they didn't hear, they don't know how to do that. So I'd like something in the plan that says that 120 meter range can be extended if applicable, because sometimes it's just it's not enough, and perhaps the development is more significant and we need to go a little further afield with our communication to our residents. So if we could put if applicable in there, I think I would appreciate that from both of you.
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Gardner, second time.
Yes, I won't be able to explain my asks because apparently I can't speak fast enough. So 12.4.1 speaks to the importance of wetlands. I would like an added to that section. Unevaluated wetlands of any size be included within the EP area until such time as they are evaluated by the planning department. We've seen how important wetlands are for many reasons. So I think we should be protecting our wetlands, whether they're evaluated or not. 4.1S, I would like this section changed to, with respect to buffers, to ensure protection should be maintained at a minimum of 15 meters from warm water watercourses and a minimum of 30 meters from wetlands and cold water courses. And that EIS will determine if those are the minimum standards or if they need to be increased. Hazard lands 12.4.2. We are still using flood mapping from Hurricane Hazel, which I think was in 1953. We need to update our flood mapping. I'll bring forward a motion on that. Forest management policies to erosion control. This should be changed only if the projects have been demonstrated to be necessary in the public interest after all other alternatives have been considered. Endangered and threatened species and their habitats. Why did we take out species at risk? That's in our existing OP. They are of increasing concern in the conservation community. Why would we reduce their protection at a time when everything is being more challenged by the environment? I'd like you to add that back in as it is in our OP now. Do you want to comment?
Right.
I see you want to comment.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardner. So that change was made because of a change in terminology at the provincial level. So I just wanted to clarify that in the definition, if you read endangered and threatened species, it's a species that is classified as an endangered species or threatened species in Ontario Regulation 230-08, which is the species at risk in Ontario list made under the Endangered Species Act, which may be amended from time to time. So this definition includes species at risk. It's just a change in terminology.
Well, then can we just put it back
Counselor?
in? So members of the public will understand that as well. Thank you. Thank you. Oak Ridges Marine Natural Core Area. Since it's been recognized that natural core areas have been identified, this is the change, I believe, as areas with a high concentration of key natural heritage features, et cetera, et cetera. No, that's in the motion already. But what we need is we need to prohibit transportation, infrastructure, and utilities in that core area. That's my opinion. I think that would be an appropriate change.
Mr. Riley?
We'll certainly look at that, Councillor.
Counselor?
Thank you. I have a problem with some of the changes in the definitions. I think I could just text you on that. I was hoping to speak to, I have a motion before council was passed the end of, I believe it was February 2022. It's about trees and green infrastructure. I discussed it with Marco. The direction in the motion was that there should be a report back from staff. Now, Marco wasn't here, and so maybe he missed it. He did point me to a couple of things in the OP, like urban forestry management. That's a new section. It's good. but please, can we replace in 6.4A may with shall? And this is talking about an urban forest management plan and the tree canopy. In B, in this new section, which is good, could you please remove vegetation, the planting of urban trees and vegetation? If we're going to talk about, I'm talking about heat islands and flooding, you know, et cetera, it's the trees that do the work. It's not shrubs and bushes. And if you give a developer, you know, a choice, they'll plant the less expensive thing. So I think we need to look at what is going to be the most important green infrastructure. And if you want to have a conversation about that, then certainly we can do that.
Councillor Yafai.
And also this terminology encouraged, you know, I don't know what that means. So Mr. Mayor, I'm finished, am I?
Yes.
Okay.
There's always opportunity for you to contact Mr. Riley and also Mr. Ramuno and go through these even in more depth. Absolutely. And I would encourage it.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. Well, much of what I wanted to say has been covered by Councillor Weiss, and Councillor Gartner had already mentioned a few things. So I'm just going to circle back in respect to the height. I know that we did recently have a motion passed about doing a subsidiary plan for an affordable housing action plan. And I'm just wondering when that draft plan is going to come to council.
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a time period yet for council, but that it was anticipated that that's something that would be completed following the adoption of the official plan. It'd be a standalone document. It's not going to deal with land use policies such as heights and build form. That's not the purpose of it. I mean, that's in this document here.
Councillor.
In the OP.
Thank you. I guess I could have a different conversation offline with you about that, because I do struggle with some of the height restrictions in conjunction with that balance, again, with offering some affordable housing, especially in designated MTSA areas. I just think that that is our opportunity where we can afford some of that. I do have concerns about, I don't know if we've consulted with developers to quite understand what the cost or performer of developing something at a 5-story restriction. And I think it's something that we need to consider as far as what we're going to be able to provide to allow families of low to middle income families, because 600,000 is certainly not affordable to a low income family. And if 35% is going to be required of a building in the MTSA, I just don't know how those numbers are be made to work, or else everybody's going to be in a box that's 400 square feet. And I don't think that's good either. So I just think we need to kind of reconsider that. I guess following up on that in respect to the height, does the town foresee that, you know, more multiple applications may end up at the OLT, and perhaps, you know, what those costs might be associated to the town having going through this process? You did mention that the two properties in the area, the promenade, did go to OLT, and this could become a pattern if we don't address it. Has that something that the town or you, Ms. Maruna, has considered?
Mr. Ramuno, I'll just add to, and you can expand upon that, but I think ultimately, Councillor, it also depends on what we decide at the table. We had one in regards to, and I'll give the example of smart centers, which we talked about. That one actually met our OP in regards to heights, but yet we pushed it off. So they ended up going to the tribunal. So ultimately it's our decision, what we decide to do. So about Mr. Ramuno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll only add that as council is aware, as the mayor pointed out, we have a number of applications, current applications before council. A number of them are at the tribunal for various reasons. We do have other applications, formal applications that have been submitted that are respecting the current hierarchy in our official plan. ranging from the 5, 6, 7 stories. So I'm sure that we may get in the future appeals. Council has seen some of the communication from landowners in the development industry who have interest in property, who are identified. Some of them have identified to council or encouraging council to increase the height limits, but we also have formal applications that are in keeping with our official plan, and a couple at the tribunal have asked for an extra story or 2. So again, I can't anticipate how many more applications are going to be appealed to the board. That may happen down the road, but I think we'll deal with those as they come in.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And specifically, I was more or less contesting because of the height. As far as Smart Center, all those wasn't kind of the same thing. I wish, my motion to move it forward was put on the floor and second by my council colleagues, but at that time it was not. And I agree that within our OP, if the rules of engagement all line up, then we shouldn't be holding it back. Although the applicant did have the choice to come back to public planning, we didn't say they couldn't do it, but they could have come back to public planning. That's my comment on that. To follow up, there was something that was said about the Ann Bartley Smith property, and there was some confusion about open private space and such. And I just kind of wanted to touch on, it kind of allowed me to kind of think back and maybe why one of the reasons this had occurred. I did have a motion that was passed by council on open space private land redesignation, because 129 acres of land needed to be updated. So it was represented about 23% of the mapping. And I was wondering if there was anything in this new official plan that has reflected that.
I'll go to Mr. Riley, because I believe, Mr. Romano, you weren't here, but when we did our steering committee, I think Councillor Kim brought up that motion in regards to the open spaces and looking at strengthening it and creating more EP designations. But Mr. Riley, I'm sure you remember that conversation.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gilliland. Yes, so if you look at the existing official plan schedule versus what's now been mapped as on Schedule B, we've really worked hard to delineate parkland versus environmental protection. So I couldn't tell you, I'd be interested to know actually the total land area that you mentioned, if it worked out to that amount. But our environmental consultant, North-South Environmental, part of our consulting team, really worked hard to do those updates. A lot of the mapping was actually not even, especially in the secondary plan areas in the northeast part of Aurora, not even correctly mapped, because it was based on an old concept of what the schedule should be. So all of that has now been fixed. If there's anything that you notice that still needs to be adjusted, feel free to reach out and we'll definitely look at some more. But we have done a significant amount of work in that regard.
Councillor?
That's great. That's good to hear. I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't think I have anything else. Oh, I do. Councillor Gartner had spoken about the urban canopy, urban forestry management plan. And I don't know if you touched on it, Councillor Gardner, but there was some language in there about council shall develop an urban forest management plan in consultation with the York Region and Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, which may include a town-wide tree canopy target to ensure existing trees are protected and the canopy cover within the town is enhanced. And I remember having this conversation, and there was a motion brought forward to look at that urban forest management report and have some dedicated updates to that. However, I don't see any action going forward, and wondered if it would be more appropriate to replace that with shall, because I know that we were rather excited about having that reassessment, because the last time that reassessment was made was well before the 2016 sprawl. And I think it's important that we do see where we're at this point and set some targets that we can look towards.
Mr. Riley, can we do it?
We can definitely look at that, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor?
Appreciate that. There's also some verbiage in here about the planting of trees and vegetation. And I think some of the sentiments that I've heard from a lot of some council members and also residents is, we're really trying to encourage that when we do have a tree compensation policy or compensation in general, that, obviously you want to encourage, larger trees rather than the sapling, but also the vegetation part we often see is a lot of shrubbery and low-lying shrubs that's kind of replacing the tree. And I think it would be appropriate to strengthen that, maybe perhaps even removing that, to really focus on trees, tree species, things that are appropriate to, our climate of today and of good quality. Is that something that you would be able to consider or look at?
Mr. Riley?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely look at that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor, you have 5.
Okay, perfect. I'm sure there's a few other things I'd like to address, and maybe offline we can have further conversation between now and final draft. So I do appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo, second time.
Thank you. Just two things. First off, you had mentioned that there was a lot of correspondence from landowners to request some changes. Are we tracking those, and to what degree or at what point will those be communicated to us or reflected on either any of the mapping, kind of where we are and what the requested changes are, and what your recommendations will be? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Riley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gallo. Yes, we do have a table that actually tracks all public comments received and then our response to it and what was changed. And we'll continue to do that as comments come in. I can tell you the only changes that we've made to the schedule reflect, I would say, the mapping errors that didn't reflect an actual approval that already existed. We haven't made any changes that have resulted from a request made through this process. I will say that at this time anyway.
Councillor?
Thank you. The only other thing is we get 10 minutes each in this forum to discuss these things and ask questions, and GC will have a little more time. But I think there's some merit to having a council workshop on this. It's a big enough document, an important enough document that we should really spend the time going through it, maybe similar to what we do at budget, kind of a line by line, or everybody should be prepared beforehand to ask their questions and move motions forward as they see fit. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure through you to the clerk or to Mr. Ramuno how we can go about doing that. I don't know if my council colleagues are interested in that kind of thing, but I would find it very helpful.
Sure.
Through Mr. Mayor, if that's council's direction, we can certainly arrange for a council workshop at a later stage when we finalize and address all the comments to the best of our abilities and before council adoption. So that's something that we can certainly arrange if it's council's wish.
Councilor?
I would say sooner rather than later, before a final draft, obviously, because we would like to have input on a final draft. So I'm happy to put forward a motion if this is the time. If it isn't at council, whenever the time is, and I'd love to hear from others to see if it's actually something they would want to entertain as well, Mr. Mayor.
It's fine. Councilor, we can discuss about putting together a workshop. Absolutely. And
So do you need a formal?
Not at this moment, but yeah, we'll do it. I don't think we need a formal motion at all. I think we can just put something together.
Yeah, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, since everyone's spoken twice, just before I call the vote, thank you, Mr. Riley. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, residents, landowners, everyone, and council. Thanks for all the comments. I think it's a lot of great suggestions in regards to what we would like to see, and including some of the changes in some specific wording. It's quite obvious that, our town, when it comes to heritage, environment, those two aspects are very, very important to our town. But also, as all the things that were mentioned today, from affordability to attainable housing to active transportation, becoming more of a walkable, pedestrian-friendly community, I think those things are vitally important as well. And I think we're trying to move towards that. But, I think ultimately, sometimes when we have these discussions about development, our official plan, some people say, maybe we're overdeveloping or we're not, we're against development. And I think it's neither one of them. I think ultimately what we always talk about is it has to be appropriate for our community. Each community is unique, and everyone's heard me say this many times that Toronto's not the same as Aurora. Aurora is not the same as Guelph or Peterborough or Wawa, Ontario. We're all different. We're all unique in our own special way. And policies cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's why we have this exercise where we develop our official plan at the local level. And this is why we get into such detail in regards to it, so we can make sure that it is appropriate for our town. And so I would encourage everyone sitting here, as well as residents that aren't here, maybe are watching, and we'll continue to get the word out, to continue to reach out to Mr. Edwards and get their feedback to them, and let's make sure that we have a plan that is made in Aurora. But I just do want to make one other thing clear to everyone is we need to be cautious as well, because what we're seeing from the province as well is they're stepping in and they're making major changes to official plans, even though once they've been approved. I'll give you an example. Peterborough sent in their plan for approval, for final approval. It came back with 61 changes from the province, and those changes are unappealable. So even though we might get it right for Aurora, they might make changes. And so we need to ensure that we also talk about the fact that our official plan, which everyone's heard me say, that it should be worth the paper that it's written on. And we should be able to have the authority to uphold that. If we create the plan that is the great plan for our town, we should be able to uphold that plan. Is there flexibility? Absolutely. But it should be on our terms, our community, our council that makes those changes in regards to what's best for our community. So that being said, I hope everyone stays engaged. I thank council for all their comments this evening, and I look forward to as we work through this process, and hopefully we'll put together that workshop, Councillor, and we can take a really deep dive into this as a council together. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'll call the vote. Linda, I'm a yes. Did you close the council? Councillor Weiss is a yes. That carries. Confirming bylaw. Councillor Gallo, Councillor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Gardner, Councillor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned, everyone. Thank you, everyone.